All right, everybody, welcome to episode 4 of the Holy Face Generations podcast. I'm Tom Zuzolo. This is my mother, Mary Jane Zuzolo, Holy Face expert, relative of Sister Mary St. Peter. I think I'm the only one who still says Sister Mary St. Peter. I've heard a lot of people say Sister Marie de St. Pierre. I think you're on
Yes,
that. Am
yeah.
I doing it wrong by saying
No,
that?
no, her in Carmel, they kind of truncated things because there were so many Sister
Mm.
Marys of such and such, so they just referred to her as Sister Saint Pierre, and then all her family referred to her as Sister Saint Pierre. So usually
Oh,
that's what you
and
grew
I'm
up
technically
hearing.
family.
Yes, that's
So, okay,
right.
okay.
So
So I'm doing it right.
yeah.
But anyway, we're back for another episode, episode 4. We are doing the final episode of kind of a 3 episode series on blasphemy. This is going to be the one where it comes all together. This is going to be the most important one, the most exciting one. Mom, I think, is even the least nervous today. So she's on her game. And I have surprisingly few notes to go off of that Mom printed me out. So I'm going to be kind of improvising some as well. But to start us off, we've started to talk about blasphemy. Get us on the right page, kind of catch us up to speed on that. Over the past 2 episodes, and even the special episode, we talked a little. But bring us up to speed, Mom.
Okay, so yeah, we'll go into some specific scenarios or examples here in a little bit. Basically, we just felt that we need to all be on the same page regarding the blasphemy that we encounter or that we may be tempted to do ourselves before we move on to I don't want to say deeper topics because that is
It is the
extreme.
most offensive sin to God, right?
Yes, exactly. And so I think that's where we can begin is by maybe another quote to remind us of how offensive blasphemy is in the eyes of God because, let's face it, in modern culture it's not even really acknowledged as a problem. And so I have a couple quotes here.
Uh
Let me
oh,
see.
Mom's broken out her book collection.
Yeah,
You
this
should
one's
see how many books Mom had. And look at these notes. Look at all these post-it notes. And Mom, what are you doing?
well, I know
Your brain needs to be studied. When
that
you
was
die, we're sending it to the lab, I think.
was a very unconventional way to keep track of things in the beginning, and
Wow.
that. But okay, so here we go. All right, so this is Christ speaking to Sister Saint Pierre. Behold, if there be any sorrow like unto my sorrow, my divine Father and my cherished spouse, the Holy Church, are despised, outraged by my enemies. Will no one rise up to revenge me by defending them against those enemies? I can no longer remain in the midst of an ungrateful people.
Hmm.
Behold the torrents of tears that flow from my eyes. Can I find no one to dry them by making reparation of honor to the glory of my Father, begging of him the conversion of the guilty? And let's see. And then he goes on to say, the most holy and terrible name of the God of armies, of the King of kings, is despised and blasphemed.
Hmm.
His holy day profaned by an infinite number of sinners, and no one is concerned, no one thinks of avenging him. But behold, our Lord Jesus Christ. Okay, so this is actually the editor speaking about that quote. Our Lord Jesus Christ, the ambassador from the kingdom of heaven, demands reparation of honor for his divine Father, or he proclaims war against us. So
Wow.
that's the consequence if we do not make reparation. And there's other times where he just comes out and says, woe to those who do not make reparation. And I
I think this
mentioned
is a
that.
good place to start because I think some people are going to go into this episode thinking blasphemy. It's like, do I want to observe or do I not want to think about it? And we
Hmm.
need to put it in the context of like, God's kind of mad and it's not really a choice. It's kind of the number one thing we need to be thinking about, right?
That's right. And last time I mentioned that Christ says these offenses, which again he points out in this quote, the things that is making him most upset are the offenses against the Father and against the church, which the Holy Face, we are told in the Revelations, does represent both of those things, or the Godhead, and then the face of the church or its doctrine, and then of course it's Christ. sacred humanity as well, what he suffered in the Passion. But so I think that we need to remember that he's most offended because of these offenses against God and His church, and he himself is in the Golden Arrow prayer that we discussed in episode 2. He himself is glorifying the name of God, and
Hmm.
so I think it's kind of important to explain that
Of
he.
God the Father.
Yes,
Hmm.
that's right. And so he's acting as ambassador, and he's telling us this has to be remedied. We have to make this right, or we will suffer the consequences of a just chastisement.
And we talked in episode 2 about how when you're aware of these things, it's part of your job to, sorry, have the make reparations, because it's kind of like a special place you're in if you have the education level to know about how offensive blasphemy is. Is that right?
Yes, that's right. In a sense, we're like a chosen people. We're like the Israelites of old, and of course, now that's transformed or transferred to the faithful in the Catholic Church. But we, in that sense, since we're given knowledge about this, we do need to use it. And he says we are held accountable if we do not use it. And so I think that maybe that can kind of help set up a little bit again.
A
And
little bit of pressure, though. A little
yes,
bit, I can see the pitchforks starting to get sharpened.
yeah, that's right. But even that simple golden arrow prayer that we discussed, Sister Saint Pierre she was made aware that there were torrents of graces flowing from Christ's heart when that prayer is said with devotion, because it's like a delightful wound to him.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, rather than these terrible wounds of the blasphemy.
Wow. Okay. You just know a lot. Now I got to tell you something. I think you got to put your chain away. It's rubbing on the microphone a
Oh,
little bit.
okay, all
This
right.
is the one thing Mom and I fight about. She always wants to display her chain, and I keep telling her, Mom, when it rubs the microphone, it's going to make a noise. So I was a little zoned out while you were talking. I was thinking about the chain a little
That's
bit.
okay.
But I do have more questions for you.
Okay.
In episode 2, you discussed blasphemy and the music and the movies and everything like that, and kind of just the culture in general. And I think that it's really a stumbling block because people love their degenerate, godless movies. Even I love, and I'm a sinner just like anybody else. I love a good comedy movie that's kind of irreverent, or even a movie that's got a beautiful actress in it. I'm gonna admit it. We like those movies, Mom, and I think you're kind of telling us we might have to stop. And that's why I
That's
said the
right.
pitchforks. I almost brought a pitchfork as a little prop today to hold. I thought it might be a little tacky, though. But I think you're going to be a little bit unpopular after you share some of your points
Yeah.
about why we need to be on our game a little bit more, especially if we are kind of people who are aware of this stuff. We're aware how hurtful blasphemy is, and we might have to put away the comedy DVDs. We might have to do that.
We do. That's right. So, yeah, we're reminded in Mark 7 that it's what comes from within that defiles us, and so
Mm.
our blasphemy, but also our giving consent or agreement or approval at some level, and so just real quickly in the episode 2 we talked about some quick prayers that can be said when we encounter blasphemy, just on the spot, and then we'll get into some examples maybe. We talked about admirable is the name of God, and I want to emphasize the Latin because most people might know this, but Latin is used in exorcisms because it is, in a sense, so much more respected by the devil. It's he knows it's the real thing, so
Mm.
he I guess listens more.
I guess I should have paid attention in Latin class.
I know. Well, we all should have.
Mom tried to get me to. She couldn't do it. There was nothing to be done. I would not pay attention. But continue, Mom.
Okay, so the Latin for admirable is the name of God is mirabile nomen Dei, and if you say that enough, it just flows right off. And so this is something you can say multiple times, even when there's no blasphemy. It's just a great way to honor God.
And that's actually on your necklace, right? That's why you wear it.
Yeah, this is the one that's not on this necklace, but what is on this necklace, on one side is begone Satan, and so the Latin for that is vade retro satana.
Okay.
And then the other side is similar, like, you had the right idea. Blessed be the name of God. So sit nomen Domini benedictum. Sit nomen Domini benedictum. And okay, so we talked a little bit like, well, should we just always say these things out loud, these acts of reparation? And I just kind of want to say, we always have to balance courage with prudence, and there may be instances where, we're just inciting basically an insane person to violence or some other
Mm.
extreme, or we just have to kind of take into context the situation and the nuances of
Mom,
the
what
Holy
type of people
Spirit.
are you hanging out with? Mom's got a strange friend group, it sounds like.
Well,
Insane people to violence. I don't know, Mom. I might not have to come to this house too much more. Sounds like strange people are here.
but it's the same kind of prudence that you use with your friends, or
Yeah, but they're
if
not
they're
insane. They're not going to attack me. No, I'm just
true.
kidding.
Okay. So, but the bottom line is just keep in mind, okay, are we valuing our, the other person's feelings or our social credit more than we're honoring God's name? And so again, maybe it's not always appropriate to say it out loud or to gently correct them by turning their blasphemy into a prayer, but these are things that maybe can be worked into at times.
It would theoretically be ideal.
It would,
Okay.
yeah. Okay,
But
yeah.
it's not necessarily a sin not to.
That's right. Yeah. I mean, but it is very, I think it's very important, since we know about this, to, at least in our hearts, make those little short prayers of reparation.
Yeah, and if you're somebody like me, I have very little social credit, and so it doesn't really matter. So I've been trying to start getting a little better at it because I don't have much to lose anyway. Um, Now, but having said that, I totally know what you're saying. Sometimes in the moment, it's like, it's just so hard to work yourself up to that. It's crazy how the little things are so difficult to say out loud when you're professing your faith, and it always reminds me of Saint Peter,
Mm-hmm.
and we always may be tempted to think about how cowardly he was in the moment, but I think I've had hundreds of moments like
Mm-hmm.
that, and I
That's
still
right.
do, and I still will. And it's just kind of one of those things where our strength comes from God, and sometimes we don't accept His strength, and
Mm-hmm.
yeah, it's very difficult. But
Yeah.
that's a good point. So, can you go a little more into your next point
Mm-hmm.
that you were going to talk about?
Yeah. So, let's get to some specific examples in our
Yeah.
modern culture. And maybe before we do that, let's just super quickly review mortal and venial sins, because it will come into play when we talk about these things. And,
Okay.
mortal, obviously, grave offenses that sever our relationship with God. Venial are lesser offenses that do not sever, but they wound our relationship with Him. And so mortal sin, it's it's a serious violation of God's law that destroys the charity in the heart of man. It completely separates the sinner from God's grace. That's why it's called mortal or deadly sin. And for a sin to be considered mortal, it must have three conditions. You has to be a grave matter. So it must be a serious offense, contrary, or I should say, against the God's law and His commandments. You have to have full knowledge that it is a grave sin.
Mm-hmm.
And so, if there is true unintentional ignorance, it's not just something that you think, oh, I should look into that, but I'm not going to. Is it right or wrong? But no, it's truly unintentional. That can remove any imputability, or at least diminish it if there's a grave offense. But let's be real. As the Catechism says, that there's no excuse for not knowing what is written on our hearts in
Mm.
the way of moral law. Our conscience tells us certain things, like we know that murder, unless it's true self-defense or a definitely a just war or
Or
whatever,
you're an insane friend of Mary Jane.
right, then that would be wrong. And
Uh-huh. Now,
so
I want to ask one thing because I think that some people, I even kind of used to think this, they would say, oh, well, a word could never really be a grave matter because you're not hurting anybody. Even if you say the worst thing against God, it's easy to think, well, I'm not killing anybody, I'm not even hurting anybody, I'm just saying a word. And so, is it truly? What I'm learning is that that is the gravest matter, actually, and our
Yeah.
culture has just gotten it wrong. And actually, saying OMG is a grave matter. It's just we don't accept it in our culture, probably because of some of the
Hmm.
movies and music that we may be talking about later.
Hmm.
But is that right? Is it truly a grave enough matter to be a mortal sin?
Yes, well, because we know in the Ten Commandments, thou shalt not take the name of the Lord thy God in vain. And, just like think of our everyday actions, they have a ripple effect, our acts of kindness or whatever. And words are a part of that, a huge part of that. And they can hurt people severely. They can be a mark on a person's life forever. And so, we know how powerful words can be. And I, I should think more about this in terms of presenting it, but just off the cuff, we know that Christ is the Word of God made made into flesh, and so that's very powerful. The Word is very important, and so
Mm-hmm.
I think, yeah, you're right. People seem to diminish that, and we talked before about profanity and so forth, and it's just an overall diminishment of the importance of words and kind of the way in which we reflect the image of God. We don't realize, well, what we say really matters, and again, in Mark 7, that our words defile us. So
And there
that's
were
very powerful.
multiple people who died of martyrdom back in the day just because they
That's a
would
good
not
point.
blaspheme the name of God. And Job was tempted by the
Mm-hmm.
devil to curse God and die, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And that was like his whole goal of the devil was he just wanted Job to curse God. And so clearly this matters. And I would think of it also as like, you know, maybe like to put it in context, if you're dating a girl, she might say something that could truly ruin the relationship, or you could
Mm-hmm.
say something to her that could truly ruin the relationship. And
Mm-hmm.
you could probably ruin your relationship with God by saying blasphemous things because, at least for me, I would rather somebody like steal from me or physically attack me versus like say something that really, really hurts. I think I would probably
Yes,
prefer that. So it does matter.
it
And
does matter. That's right. And so, yeah, that's a good
we have
question.
to think of the martyrs. We have to think of how
Mm-hmm.
they would not, you know, defile God in any way of
Mm-hmm.
blasphemy, and they would give up their life for that. And now we are kind of just casually doing it all the time. And
Yes.
if they would give up their whole life for that, that kind of indicates how much it does matter.
Oh yeah, I think that that's a good way to put it into context. And but you know, just to finish off, one more thing about the mortal sin. So we have the grave matter, we have full knowledge, and you have to have deliberate consent. So you're not coerced in any way. You're freely and intentionally committing to whatever it is, and then so then that's all mortal sin. Venial sin, it's a lesser sin, doesn't destroy the divine life in the soul, but it does wound it, and it does desensitize us. And
Mm-hmm.
so, your tons of venial sins can't add up to be a mortal sin, but they do desensitize us and perhaps make us more inclined toward a mortal sin, lead us down that path.
Mm-hmm.
And especially really entrenched venial sins that we just keep committing over and over again. But venial sins, the charity of God is still subsisting in us, and but it is offended and wounded, and you know minor acts of impatience or unkind thoughts. Those are examples of venial sins. So, okay, now let's apply this to blasphemy.
Yeah.
So, okay, the easiest example, I guess, is you have no intention of the blasphemy, and you've given no indication of consent or acceptance, and so there's no sin. And examples might be, well, you encounter someone who suddenly blasphemes, or you're waiting in the doctor's office and you hear a blasphemous song, and there was no way of predicting that these things might happen,
Mm-hmm.
and we are offended by it. So that two key things there. So we have no culpability, but we should still say, because like you said, we are aware of what we should do. So we, at least to ourselves, we should still say a prayer of reparation. Okay, now let's take the example of, we have no intention, but in a sense, we're giving some consent.
Mm.
Okay, an example might be that there's this really seemingly wholesome PG-13 movie, and you're just assuming, well, there won't be blasphemy in there, but you didn't check like any websites and kind of see if there were any warnings about it, and then lo and behold, there's blasphemy. Probably you shouldn't even say that, but see, I'm still correcting myself. But we should say an act of reparation and stop the movie, and because there might be more,
Mm.
and then also we're not giving our vote of approval, and then
Because you
that
made a good point last time that we shouldn't be rewarding people for making these movies.
that's right.
These movie producers. I don't think they're the best people. I'm starting to get a hunch they're a little bit degenerate, Mom.
Yeah, I think sadly,
Mm-hmm.
we can't say that of every one of them, but very many seem to be. But okay, so now there's next example. You have no intention, but you do give full consent. And you think, well, how is that possible?
Mm.
Watching an R-rated movie is a very good example because it almost certainly has sinful material and very likely blasphemy. But even the other sinful material, obviously, is something you want to avoid. Or maybe you want to go to this party and you know who's putting it on. And you think, they really like that blasphemous music. And so you know if you go, you're almost certainly going to encounter it. And so this is a mortal sin. We simply have to avoid these situations. So you need to make an act of reparation and go to confession. And then finally, obviously, if you have direct intention, that's a mortal sin. So,
Wait, wait, wait. So the last point. If you, let's say, you're going on a night out, you know almost for a fact that there will be blasphemy. I guess you're kind of. It's hard for me to imagine that that would be a mortal sin.
well, because you're consenting to it. It's like you're giving your vote of approval
Wow.
by going to these things. And so, yeah, I mean, and these again are things where you're pretty sure there's going to be an offense. Like,
What if you're like 75% sure?
well, you need to make a game plan, maybe.
Okay, okay. Maybe
Like
bring
an
some
exit.
earplugs.
Yeah, and that's a good point. Like maybe, I remember years ago, you wanted to work out at the Y, and I think that we are like the music's not good there, and a game plan in that scenario would be like, well, if at all possible, have your own music playing in
Mm.
earbuds, and so try to think ahead and strategize, and we did mention before that like with the R-rated movies, yes, you could use something like ClearPlay to filter out the bad, but then you do have to keep in mind you don't want to give scandal by telling people, "Oh, I watched this and that," and you didn't bother to tell them that there was ClearPlay involved, or you just forgot. That's going to be a real possibility. So keep that in mind. So you have to have a strategy, and maybe like you say, you're 75% sure. You go there, you hear the first offense of going to a party, say, and you hear
Mm-hmm.
the first offense, you just got to leave because
Mm.
these
Wow.
people, they may just be getting revved up, and so
And
you
that's a good way to reduce your social credit, and that way you can start to be a little bit more radical in the future because
right.
you'll just kind of clear out almost all your friends in probably a week or two. So, if you're watching this and you're one of my friends, you might be on the chopping block. I might have to start cutting people. Mom, you know what you remind me of is you remind me of like a few years ago when people started first talking about like microplastics in the food and seed oils, and everybody was upset with them, with those
Yes.
people. They were like, "Oh, we want the degenerate, we want the Twinkies and the Cheetos," and now it's starting to become more. Studies are coming out that like, wow, it really is something you should try to avoid. But a few years ago, it was like you couldn't be taken seriously if you were saying, "Oh, I'm not going to eat a Cheeto right now because it's got red 40." People would be like, "Who is this guy? Get out of here. We hate you." They would truly hate you for that. And now it's more acceptable. It's still weird.
Hmm.
But it's like, "Oh, yeah, I don't eat Cheetos." And they're like, "Oh, yeah, I kind of get it."
Yeah.
This is kind of, I think, the early stages of this
I
blasphemy
think so.
revolution, because I'm going to be honest, even as your son, I'm sitting here right now and I'm thinking, how on earth am I going to live a life like this? This seems impossible. And I guess the best way I could justify it is it's kind of addition through subtraction. When you clear
Mm-hmm.
out the degenerate parts of your life, you will be better. And it's not something where you're going to immediately notice it. But over
Mm-hmm.
time, if you become less and less degenerate, it will improve your overall life. And I got to be honest, if you're watching this and thinking these people are off their rocker, I get it. I kind of feel that way too a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
But it's kind of like one of the anytime you're the first person to start saying something radical, it's
Mm-hmm.
going to be seen as like, but I want my Cheetos, I want my Twinkies, I
Right.
want my microplastics. But as as the data starts to roll out, it starts to become more easy. But I think right now you're like one of the first innovators. You're like a pilgrim of blasphemy. And I think it's going to be easy for people to look at you and me in the wrong light, but we have to stand on business. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
it is what it is. We are freaks. We are a little bit strange. But at the end of the day, in a few years, I think things are going to start making more sense. The
Yeah.
more degenerate we get, I think people are going to say, I want to remove all degeneracy from my life. The same way people say now, I want to remove all of the processed foods from my diet.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and yeah, I get it. Like, people want to have fun, people want to go out, people want to go to a party. But at the end of the day, you have to wonder, like, are you one of those people that's like a martyr who will not blaspheme no matter
Mm-hmm.
what? Are you willing to die against blasphemy? Or are you willing to bend the rules a little bit and say, you know what, I'm going to hang out with my degenerate friends, I'm going to listen to this degenerate music or movie? And you have to put it in a martyrdom context. There are
Mm-hmm.
people who used to be willing to die over this, and
Mm-hmm.
now all we have to do is abstain from a party.
Right. And you bring up a good point. It is a lot like a diet. Like say you're diabetic and you just know there's certain things you cannot eat. It's going to cause trouble, or you can only take in certain amount. And then like you said, some of the newer findings about even how bad sugar and obviously plastics and processed foods are and stuff like that. It's a challenge in the beginning, but there's now we know these consequences of if
Mhm.
we don't start to change the way we eat, then this and that is going to most likely happen. We might get a certain disease, a cancer, whatever. And so I think we have to look at it, because we talked before, like, well, the way that this works is, we just get the natural consequences for our collective
Mm.
choices. And so if we as a society are rejecting God and offending him terribly, guess what? He's going to say, "Okay, you don't want me in your life. I'm going to leave." And in a very real sense. And I've got a quote about that. I think here in a couple minutes I'll get to that. But one other thing I want to say is you're right. I mean, someone's going to bring up, I'm sure, or think of this, that even on the Vatican's top 50 or 100 movies, whatever it is, there are some movies that do have blasphemy in them. And, an example is Scarlet and the Black. I know there's at least one instance of blasphemy in that movie. And,
They got you, mom.
I know. And, honestly, I think I'm sorry. Technically, those movies just should not be on that list. And I
Mm.
have to think there's a little bit of some sort of human error in that recommendation. It's not as if the Pope himself, using his infallibility, signed off on
Yeah.
that
It
list.
was probably an intern. It was probably some guy like me who just liked some movies
Right.
and wanted to
Somebody is
throw
like,
some
I
on
just
there.
love that movie. Let's put it in. And
It's a pretty bad movie anyway. I don't know. Some of the movies on that list, I've got to be honest, I've gone through that list. Movies are pretty rough. I don't even like most of them.
there are a couple rough ones. I'll admit that. But so yeah, and then another thing to kind of keep in mind is just on a whole, we won't go down this rabbit hole, but you know just in general, in movies, when you have gratuitous or unnecessary, let's take nudity or blasphemy, uh, things that can't be simulated or pretended, like nudity is nudity. You can't really pretend that so much. or at least if it is showing the nudity, that's not pretended. And then obviously blasphemy is something that um, you can't pretend. And so generally those are, considered evil in movies. And so again, the bottom line is just you've got to keep asking yourself, do we value being entertained or even edified at some level more than honoring the name of God? And again, I
We
think,
got to think of the martyrs.
yeah, Tom brings up a great point. That's really really
Because
good.
it would have technically been a venial sin for them to blaspheme because they were put between blasphemy and death. So they were
Mm-hmm.
actually being coerced. So
Mm-hmm.
technically they were just not committing a venial sin and they were still willing to die because they were standing on business for God. And you got to respect that at the end of the day.
Yeah.
And, the other thing is the older I get, I'm 26 now, and early 20s and teenage years, I was just wanting to have fun so much, and the older I get, though, the more I realize nothing good happens after 10 p.m. And it's not just a spiritual thing. It's like all the trouble I've been in my life, all of the speeding tickets I've gotten, all of the gambling money I've lost. I used to be a bit of a gambling addict as well. But, all these things, they always happen when you're in these degenerate crowds. And even if you're purely looking at your life from a secular perspective, where you are just trying to, let's say, be successful in a secular way, you're not going to achieve that by being with degenerate people who just
Mm-hmm.
want to drink and have fun and whatever. And I had to learn that the hard way. I think I could have saved a lot of time and money by, just kind of abstaining from things that I thought were quote unquote harmless fun.
Mm-hmm.
And this kind of seems like one of those things where it is addition through subtraction, it is radical, it is kind of a whole lifestyle change. It's like if you realize that everything you've been eating is actually bad for you, you've been slowly poisoning yourself. It's kind of like the same realization where everything kind of that you do for fun, you have to reevaluate it. If you
Mm-hmm.
have, a wholesome sport or a wholesome group activity, that's great, and we all got to do more of that, and I'm trying to do more of that. But some of these degenerate things, like going out to the club, even I'll even go out to the club sometimes as a young man, and I can't do that anymore
Mm-hmm.
either. I've decided no more club, no more casino, no more, not really even the bars. I just
Mm-hmm.
feel like it's not good for me on a secular level. It's not good for me on a spiritual level. And I'm not saying that I'm, perfect and an example, but
Mm-hmm.
I will say that I found overall my life is better the more I abstain from the degenerate behaviors.
Mm-hmm.
And it's almost like almost like an unexpected twist. You would think your life would get so much worse, but I find the friends I do make, they're better people, and they're not attacking me like mom's friends. I don't know. It's very tough to justify, honestly, when you're this early,
Mm-hmm.
when you're one of the only people saying this, when you're one of the most radical. But I respect you, mom. I think you're on the right track. I think it's just what people don't want to hear. They want you to sit here and say,
Right.
yes, the club is great. The club, I go to the club, you
Mm-hmm.
know. But unfortunately, I think you're standing on business, mom, and I think you're breaking some hearts.
I think so. It is, it does change everything. As we know, like new converts, I think typically have that reaction, and reverts,
Hmm.
that
Why did you just gesture to me?
well, because you just said you were.
I've always been Catholic.
Well, that's true, but you've embraced it at a
I know. I
deeper,
know what you
deeper
mean.
level, and yeah, you see everything through a
And
totally different.
sinners.
Yes, we're all sinners, and but yeah, you see things in through a different lens, and you realize that God's laws, they are for our benefit. There's no two ways about it. And like you're saying, you may not like it, but then at some point you realize, well, this is really for my own good, and
Yes.
it's for the good of the society too. And I did want to mention too. I think I have another quote that will help us understand, how
Now, are you going to be able to find it in all these
you
notes?
can see I put number two there, the
Oh, there you
second
go.
quote. Yeah. Okay. So it says, okay, our Lord said to me, this is Sister St. Pierre speaking, you cannot comprehend the abomination of this sin of blasphemy.
Wow. Wait, read that again.
Okay, you cannot comprehend the abomination of blasphemy. If my justice were not restrained by my mercy, the guilty would be destroyed in an instant.
Wow.
Even inanimate beings would feel my vengeance, but I have an eternity in which to punish the wicked. And then he gives us the remedy, and this I quoted last time. He's talking about the work of reparation that would be the Holy Face devotion. Then he made me understand the excellence of this work of reparation, how far it surpassed all others, and how pleasing it was to God, to the angels, the saints, and to our Holy Mother, the Church. And then this was what brought up the admirable is the name of God. Oh, would that we could understand the glory we could obtain by repeating these words, Mirabile nomen Dei, in a spirit of reparation for blasphemy, even one time. So
Wow.
that is really powerful.
And it's hard to disagree with your radicalism when, you know, it's just kind of the truth.
It
It's
is.
written right there. It's so offensive. It's so, you know, upsetting for God. I guess he doesn't really get upset, but you know what I mean.
Yeah.
It's so angering for God, and even the little things, especially if we're well educated, we have to cut them out, and it's kind of brutal,
It
and
is.
everybody is mad at you, Mom. Everybody hates you.
I know.
No,
I
I'm just
know.
kidding. Everybody hates both of us, but the thing is, it's the truth.
It is. Okay, so now I'm going to bring to mind something that may help us a little bit more. And we did touch on this before, that blasphemy is Satan's signature sin, so to speak. And
It
this,
just keeps getting worse.
it does. And so, we know if he loves it so much, that says something. And here's the part I told you last time, but I didn't read the actual quote. Okay. 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 Under the leadership of the Prince of Darkness, and this is Christ speaking. Lucifer willingly resign resigns to the other demons the chief command of other kinds of sinners. For example, of drunkards, the immodest, the avaricious, but not of blasphemers, they being the flock of his predilection. Okay, so
Wow.
that's what she understood, and then she said, "It is he," said the divine Savior, "who makes this work of the reparation so difficult for you. But fear him not. Saint Michael and the holy angels will protect you." And then he goes on to say, "I give you my cross as a crook, and with it you will become formidable to Satan." And
Wait,
so,
what is a crook?
like the shepherd's crook.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay,
Uh
okay,
huh.
wow, wow. Well, that's encouraging. It kind of explains why there's going to be such a gut reaction to you when you say, "Well, we can't even listen to blasphemous music, or we can't even go to blasphemous parties or whatever,"
Mhm.
because everybody is so emotional about that, and
Mhm.
it's kind of clear that that's because of the devil's work. He
Yes.
makes us very trigger happy when it comes to
Mhm.
people who stand up for the blasphemy. But as you just read, we are also given extra protection and safety from Saint Michael, and we'll get through it. It's going to be rough. If you're watching this and you're thinking, "Oh boy," trust me, I'm with you. And it's going to be a rough Lent, I think. This is just in time for Lent
It
too.
is.
And
That's why we had to
man,
get to this before Lent.
Mom,
Yes.
we should have pushed this episode back. Now I'm gonna have to make some major changes. I've already
Oh.
been starting. I've started to cut out the radio and just kind of basically all movies, because I'm just like, movies are kind of a waste of time anyway for me,
Mhm.
and I don't even like them that much. But it just feels like I'm gonna have to totally change my lifestyle. But the interesting thing is, I kind of like changing my lifestyle. I want to live the least degenerate way I can. It's just
Uh-huh.
so difficult. But again, I think back to the martyrs. I know I keep saying that, but
Mhm.
these martyrs were willing to die for blasphemy. And if they can do that, I think I can turn off the radio. I think I can turn off the YouTube. And honestly, it's going to make me better anyway. We'll get more blessed, and
Mhm.
maybe even in a secular way, I'll be able to get more work done, and
Yeah, absolutely.
overall, probably a better lifestyle. I'll
Yeah.
probably be thanking you in a little bit, but right now, I'm close to getting pretty angry flipping this table.
Oh.
No, I'm just kidding. Just kidding, Mom.
Oh. Well, the last thing that and it involves story time. We'll read
Another
just a
story time
couple
from Mom.
pages here, but
Okay.
But we talked about Saint Michael and how he and the other angels will help. And so let
Yeah,
me
we
just
need
read.
help.
We do.
And this
Okay.
is from your book, right?
Yes, that's right. So this is from chapter 1. Okay, devotion to the Holy Face is not new, nor is making reparation to God. Because I don't know, I always have people say, well, devotion to the Holy Face is not new, as if to almost diminish what the devotion stands for. And I'll explain. No, that is not new. Reparation is not new, but there is something that's new. Okay,
Mm.
both reparation and devotion to the Holy Face, those two things may rightly first be attributed to the angels and especially Saint Michael, who, according to Catholic tradition, countered Satan's challenge to the majesty of the Almighty by declaring, "Who is like unto God?" Saint Michael is additionally credited with leading the good angels in victory over Lucifer and his rebel angels, such that according to Saint Francis de Sales, veneration to Saint Michael is considered a remedy against offenses to the rights of God, a means of reparation. So even just having veneration to Saint Michael, relying on him, saying the Saint Michael prayer, that is a form of reparation.
But just to clarify, we're not to pray to him. We are to pray
That's
for his
right.
intercession, or for him to help us.
Yes, that's right. Indeed, St. Michael was the first to repair, so to speak, or make reparation for affronts to God, restoring proper reverence to his face.
Hmm.
Fittingly, he is one of the three patrons of the Holy Face devotion. Uh, St. Gregory the Great noted that whenever some act of wondrous power must be performed, St. Michael is sent so that by his actions and name, which actually means who is like God, all may know that no one can do what God alone does by his superior power. And then,
Wait, so what does that mean?
okay, so just even his name, since that means who is like God, uh, when St. Michael is involved in something, it's sort of like an acknowledgement that, God alone is acting. And
Oh, wow.
yeah, so it he's all wrapped up in reparation. Okay. Now, as far as devotion to the face of God and the act of reparation in the history of man, seeking the face of God was continually referenced in the Old Testament as expressing not only a longing on the part of the Israelites, but a command from the Almighty. And there's constantly references in the Old Testament of God's face, seeking God's face. Turn your face toward us. This
Just
and
like a
that.
Job.
Yes, exactly. Um, Certainly, the Psalms and the prophets have been one long echo of this inexhaustible nostalgia of exiled man, of the prodigal child. As a demand of God, this seeking referred to the need for reparation by his chosen people for blasphemous affronts that they from time to time committed against him, lest he withdraw his face, meaning basically his blessing,
Mm.
by turning his face from them. The nostalgic longing for God, the seeking of his face on the part of the Israelites, was a desire to be caught up again in his mercy and truth, justice and peace, which was in fact again achievable after the requisite reconciliation. It was the face of God. It was as if the face of God literally needed to be turned back toward them
Mm.
for the Israelites to be able to behold it once again, to be able to enjoy God's blessing once again.
Just like our culture today.
Yes, that's right. And we that familiar psalm that we say so much with the devotion, "Show us thy face and we shall be saved." "O Lord, show us thy face and we shall be saved." That kind of summarizes what they felt. Fittingly, the Israelites were the first to see the face of God, or the face of their long-awaited Messiah, as the God incarnate, the Emmanuel, meaning God with us, which has been adored since Mary and Joseph first laid eyes upon the Christ child. Certainly, quote, "at every moment of the life of Jesus, one saw the reflection of the divine face appear. For the light of the knowledge of the glory of God is the face of Jesus Christ." And that's from Corinthians, or 2 Corinthians.
Mm.
And Christ revealed himself as the way and the truth and the life in John 14, referring in large part to his role as merciful mediator of the Father, performing himself in the place of the Israelites and all sinners the ultimate reparation by way of his redemption. Certainly, the whole of Catholic history is since dappled with miracles and saints and arts and writings illuminating the glory and beauty in Christ's face, whether radiant in the splendor of the Transfiguration or disfigured and veiled under the outrages of the Praetorium, as well as the ongoing importance of reparation as a shared obligation of co-redemption for members of Christ's mystical body. Okay, so then this is what we're going to kind of get to the point. What is
Okay.
new? So then, to unveil and soothe the face of Christ, that is, to seek and make reparation to God's face, is not new. What is new is the uniting of the act of reparation with the devotion to the Holy Face as a directed and specific God given means for man to utilize the power of Christ as hidden, so to speak, in his wounded countenance to draw mercy for sinners.
Hmm.
It's the, and we've mentioned this before, it's the offering by man of the merits and love encased in Christ's suffering to the Father as reparation for current offenses against the first three commandments, those concerning the rights of God, to draw graces for the salvation of the masses during this era of iniquity, which again, we've said before, according to our Lord, has yet to be exceeded. And so this is kind of the heart of the devotion, is this
The Holy
offering.
Face devotion.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the new part that is for our times. And
That's
that
right.
started during the French Revolution, right?
Yeah, just after the French
But
Revolution.
it's very applicable today.
Yes,
And
yes. So we've always had devotion to the Holy Face, in a sense, God's face, like, reverence for it.
even Saint Veronica.
Yes, that's right. And we've always had means of reparation, but to combine them, that, and actually, she did that in a physical sense,
Uh-huh.
but to combine the two and utilize that face of Christ, which, his merits are residing there, that in a sense then becomes, we're offering God to God, and that mirrors the consecration at
That
Mass,
sounds
or the
familiar.
offering to God.
Because our merits are not enough. We have to use God's merits to make reparations for our sins, just like the sacrifice that Jesus made for us. We couldn't have, we couldn't have just crucified you. We would have had to
That's right.
crucify Jesus
Yeah.
to make reparations. Wow. So, and that kind of reminds me also, another example of somebody who was very radical and probably seen as a nut job was Saint Veronica. And
That's true.
she's somebody, I don't think you'd catch her dead in a Kansas City club. And
That's a good point. Yeah.
she sacrificed a lot of social credit to do that. And why couldn't we, right?
Right. And we shouldn't be discouraged, because most of the saints, this was sort of a gradual realization of just everything they should be doing, of looking through a different lens when they look at their life, once they had more knowledge of their faith. And so we need to realize, but if we know something's wrong, we can't do it. We can't be like, well, let's just go ahead and wait till next month to correct that. But if we know something's wrong, now is the time. So
Wow. And I like to also think, a quote I heard a long time ago, I don't know where it's from, but somebody said, when you're deciding what to do, don't ask yourself what would 99% of Catholics do. Ask yourself what would 1% of Catholics do.
that's very
And
good.
that's how, I guess I've heard that's how we become saintly. But it's not easy. I hope nobody gets the takeaway from this episode that we think this is just easy and, oh, we're doing this all the time and we're just sharing our wisdom with these peasants. That's not the energy that we're trying to give off. I think Mom and I both struggle with, wanting to fit in. We don't want to be seen as freaks, but honestly, it's kind of a tiger can't hide his stripes. I think we're already there, and it is what it is. And Mom is definitely more freakish than me in this regard, but I want to get on your level, Mom. I want to rid my life of degeneracy, and in the same way, I find excitement in optimizing my life for new things and trying to optimize my daily routine. The degeneracy is just holding me back, and even though it's uncommon in these times, we have Saint Veronica to remember, we have the martyrs to remember, we have Job to remember, we have Sister Mary to remember.
Mm-hmm.
We got everybody to remember. Unfortunately, they're mostly dead now. So if you're doing this in today's day and age, you are going to be kind of an oddball, but
Yeah.
that's
And,
okay.
and maybe this will be a good way to end this, even for Sister St. Pierre. And I'll try to find this quote maybe for next time. But, she would occasionally, or at least during one longer period, really felt, I don't want to say repulsed by the devotion, but just
Kind of embarrassed by it
well,
almost.
yeah, I think it was it was not a positive feeling. And then
Mm,
Christ eventually revealed to her that it was Satan who was making her feel this way. And I think that when we feel sluggish and don't want to maybe uh, face up to the responsibility that this devotion gives us, I
mm.
think we need to remember that. And if he can make even Sister St. Pierre feel that way, then he's really going to be able to make inroads with us. So,
Yeah, and
yeah.
we're social creatures, and so to do
Hmm.
something that is different from the culture is kind of scary, even on a biological level, because your
Hmm.
body doesn't want you to be, out of the wolf pack.
Yeah.
It wants you to fit in because that's a survival mechanism. But I guess the martyrs were able to overcome that mechanism, and I think we can too. And it's not going to be easy. If you're tuning into this, you're probably tuning into one of the most difficult education
Hmm.
videos you can find because it's just not fun. But at the end of the day, we have to trust in God's plan, and overall, our life will be better. And Saint Michael will help us, and
Hmm.
God will help us. We have what it takes. We just have to, hit that button essentially, turn off that radio,
Hmm.
and no more comedy movies for the most part. I think.
Yeah, that's right. And I know I always heard of this title of a soap opera in the 70s. I don't know if they still have it, but it was One Life to Live. And we got to look at it like that. We just had this life. Every day counts. So we really need to make progress while we can.
So you're a big soap opera fan.
No.
I don't know, Mom. It sounds like you're a
Those would
big
be off the list too. You
no
can't
soap
watch, yeah,
operas.
no soap operas.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay, okay. So the good thing with Mom is she doesn't watch that much TV, so she's kind of got it easy. But I guess the final point I'll make is a lot of people my age are looking for a reason to kind of kick the screen time habit.
Hmm.
I spend more time than I would like on my screen. I think a lot of people my age do. And if you realize that it's causing you to sin anyway, I think it might make it easier actually to say, you know what, we'll give it some rest. We'll have to, find a new hobby. And there's so
Hmm.
much. The good thing about today's day and age is there's so many hobbies and activities you can get into, and you can really waste a lot of time on a good hobby. As I
Hmm.
could tell you, I'm practically a professional hobbyist. So, maybe you'll uncover a new hobby, maybe you'll uncover a
Hmm.
new interest, and maybe if you're creative, you can start making movies and music that isn't degenerate
Yes,
or
we need
artwork or
that.
whatever. So
Yeah.
it's overall it's addition through subtraction. We have to remember that.
Hmm.
And I guess that concludes our little 3-part series,
Hmm.
not counting the special episode on Wednesday. It was about blasphemy, and then
Hmm.
now we're going to get into some new topics.
Hmm.
So I guess Mom's not letting us off the hook either. We got some more stuff to get into, but it's going to be fun. We're going to be better at the end of it, and we're going to ascend. And thanks, Mom. Yeah, I think this was a
Well,
good
thank
episode, a
you.
good series. Yeah. All right, and thank you everybody for watching. We've been having a lot of fun making these videos, and the feedback has been amazing. We appreciate it all. We will see you in the next episode. We might have another special episode this week as well, but we'll have at least one more episode this week or next week, and we will see you then. Thank you very much. You got a prayer to say, Mom?
Oh, yes. Let's do Mirabile Nomen Dei. Admirable is the name of God.
And if you're still in Latin class, start paying more attention because the demons speak Latin apparently. So,
That's
got to
right.
do that. All right, thanks
Yeah.
everybody.